For this week's Preppin data, we're looking at some orders for a restaurant. So in our input step for our orders, we are removing any fields that are entirely null. It's very easy in Prep to tell which ones are null because we get this preview, and if it only has one value of null, we know that all the values are null in that column. So we can easily remove these without worrying that we're missing any data. So that's our first step. Now let's take a look at it. So what we have is for each guest, we have all the possible dishes they could order, and then the following column tells you which selection they've made. So that's not the easiest to understand. It's not very quick to work out who's ordered what, so we're going to reshape this data. We'll start off with a pivot. We'll do multiple columns to rows pivots. So first of all, I chose to pick up the name of everyone. And then next, I chose to add on another pivot and bring in those columns that all have an F at the top because they don't have a column header. Okay, and now our data set, we get 3 columns coming out. We have the guest name, we have all those dishes, and we have the selections that they've made. So we'll rename those, and then we'll join on the lookup tables. The lookup table is just giving all the dish names and the recipe IDs that are associated with them. So we just make that join on the dish name. We remove the additional dish field, and we make sure that we do a left join so that we don't have those course descriptions dropping out. Speaking of those course descriptions, we want to extract them from the dish field, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to write a calculated field saying if is null recipe ID, because clearly we don't have a recipe ID for starter, main, dessert, etc. So we'll keep the dish, otherwise it will just be a null. So that's the column that we get out here now. And if we just do some grouping together so that we group together our dessert and desserts, our main, our mains, and our starter and our starters. So using the drop down here to do the group values, we did it by pronunciation and made sure that the sensitivity was turned all the way up so it caught all the different cases. Okay, now we're coming on to the part where we want to start filling down. So our first step there is to make sure that we fill in the recipe IDs for the starter, main, and desserts. So as per the challenge requirement, we're saying if the course equals starters, then give it a 1. If it's a main, then give it 100. And if it's a dessert, give it 300. So this is just helping us to make sure that we have the correct ordering so that it reflects well what we saw when we inputted the data, where the data is in the same order that it is in the Excel sheet. So that's what we're trying to do at this stage. And then so that it's just easier to work with, we're just going to rank based on each guest the recipe ID in ascending order, just so that we get the numbers 1 to 13 instead of working with all the random numbers that are here. Okay. And then we do another step where we filter to just the courses. We get their order numbers coming through, get rid of all of those other fields there, and join this back on to our main data source. So we do our guest equal to our guest, and we have our order greater than or equal to the order from this course only step. And that creates a bit of scaffolding. You see we now have 104 rows where before we had 52. So we'll need to filter this down a little bit, but the good news is that we're getting closer to being able to fill down, because you can see here, for example, that we've got filled in for all those courses. There are no nulls now in the course field. So we just need to do a little bit of filtering. So we do our max order here. So we do a fixed level of detail calculation where we group by our guest and we group by the order that comes from this step. And we take the maximum order that comes from here, because what's happening where we've done that scaffolding is, say for example, our dessert is going to have both the mains and the starters as duplicated rows. We want to filter it should be just the dessert. Okay, so then we do that filtering where we say our max order is equal to our order minus 1, and we get down to our 52 rows again, and you can start to scroll down and see that it's in the same order as the Excel sheet again. So all of our starters are grouped together, all of our mains, all of our desserts. It's working how we want it to, which is great. We remove some unnecessary fields, we rename our course field, and then we filter out any place where our dessert is equal to the word dessert. So for example here. We remove those, and then we also make sure that we filter out our null selections here too. So we're just left with these 12 rows at the end where we have just each of the guests' orders for their starter, their main course, and their dessert. And that's the challenge this week. We hope you enjoyed it. It's always fun to work with different data structures because you never know what you'll encounter out there in the wild. So thanks very much for watching.